Velociraptor saves human baby from a predator. What follows will melt your heart. How will this story escalate? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The dense prehistoric jungle was alive with the sounds of ancient creatures, a world untouched by human hands. Towering ferns swayed in the humid air, their leaves shimmering under the golden light that pierced through the thick canopy. In the heart of this untamed wilderness, nestled beneath the protective embrace of a hollowed-out log, a human baby, no older than a few months, lay wrapped in soft animal pelts. The infant whimpered softly, its tiny fists curling instinctively as its bright, unknowing eyes fluttered open to the vast and perilous world around it. Nearby, the ground trembled ever so slightly. Heavy, deliberate footfalls sent tiny vibrations through the soil. Something was approaching, something enormous. A shadow loomed over the forest floor, distorting the sunlight. The scent of flesh filled the air, an unmistakable presence signaling the arrival of a top predator. The creature that emerged from the trees was a monstrous behemoth, a massive theropod, its muscular frame towering over the undergrowth. Its eyes, sharp and intelligent, flickered with hunger as its nostrils flared, catching the scent of something vulnerable. The infant's soft cries attracted the predator's attention. It turned its enormous head toward the log, its jaws parting ever so slightly, revealing rows of dagger-like teeth. The beast took a slow, deliberate step forward. Leaves crunched beneath its weight as it approached. Lowering its head, golden reptilian eyes locked onto the helpless infant. Then, the forest exploded with movement. A blur of sleek, feathered scales streaked across the ground, darting through the foliage with terrifying speed. The predator barely had time to react before a smaller creature leaped onto its flank, claws slashing through thick hide. A velociraptor. The theropod let out an earth-shaking roar, thrashing violently in an attempt to dislodge the attacker. The raptor, significantly smaller but far more agile, used its powerful hind legs to latch onto the predator's side, its curved sickle claws sinking deep into flesh. Its jaws clamped down on the larger dinosaur's shoulder, teeth tearing into muscle as it growled, a primal challenge issued to the massive carnivore. The larger predator twisted, slamming its body against a tree in a desperate attempt to crush the raptor. The impact sent shockwaves through the jungle, but the raptor was too fast, disengaging just in time to avoid being flattened. It landed deftly on the ground, its claws digging into the dirt as it faced the beast once more. The predator hesitated. Blood trickled down its side, the pain evident in its movements. This hunt was no longer simple. The cost of pursuing such small prey had become a dangerous gamble. With one last, lingering glare at the baby, the theropod let out a frustrated snarl before retreating into the jungle, its footsteps fading into the distance. Silence returned to the forest, save for the quiet rustling of leaves in the wind. The velociraptor turned its attention toward the infant. Its piercing yellow eyes studied the small, fragile creature, nostrils flaring as it took in the strange scent. This was not an animal of the jungle. It did not belong to any known herd or pack. And yet, it was alive. The raptor took a cautious step forward, lowering its snout toward the baby. The infant, unaware of the danger it had just escaped, let out a soft coo, its tiny hands reaching toward the creature as though recognizing something familiar. The raptor hesitated. Something in the infant's eyes, deep, trusting, unafraid, held the predator still. The fierce, calculating instincts that governed its every hunt, every survival-driven decision, faltered. Instead of recoiling, instead of retreating into the safety of the jungle, the raptor did something entirely unexpected. It nudged the baby gently with its snout. The infant giggled. The sound was foreign, unlike anything the velociraptor had ever heard before. It was not a cry of pain, not a distress call from prey. It was something else, a sound of warmth, of trust. The raptor pulled back slightly, tilting its head in curiosity. The baby reached again, its tiny fingers brushing against the predator's snout. The touch was feather-light, barely noticeable against the raptor's rough, scaly skin. For reasons beyond instinct, beyond logic, the raptor did not move away. Instead, it stayed. Night fell over the prehistoric world, casting a deep, violet hue across the sky. The jungle, ever restless, hummed with nocturnal life. In the heart of the wild, under the soft glow of the moon, an apex predator stood watch over the most unlikely of companions. The Velociraptor curled its body around the infant, shielding it from the cool night air, its sharp eyes scanning the darkness for any threats. It had chosen, against all natural order, to protect this fragile being. And in the depths of the jungle, where survival ruled above all else, a bond unlike any before had begun to form. The night was alive with the sounds of the prehistoric world. In the distance, the calls of creatures unseen echoed through the dense jungle. The rustling of ferns, the distant hoots of nocturnal flyers, and the occasional deep, guttural growl of a faraway predator all blended into the symphony of the wild. Yet, within this chorus of life and death, something unprecedented was unfolding. The Velociraptor remained curled protectively around the infant, its sharp eyes scanning the dark expanse. Every few moments, its head lifted slightly, nostrils flaring as it caught new scents drifting through the cool night air. It was not asleep. A hunter like this could never afford to let its guard down, especially not with something so vulnerable at its side. The baby, wrapped in soft animal pelts, breathed deeply, its tiny chest rising and falling in rhythmic motion. In the flickering moonlight, its skin seemed almost pale compared to the deep hues of the jungle, an odd contrast against the predator that now stood as its guardian. The raptor's gaze flickered toward the infant, watching as its small fingers twitched in a dream. A low, curious rumble escaped from the raptor's throat. In all its life, the Velociraptor had known only instinct. The chase, the kill, the hierarchy of survival. The jungle dictated the rules, and all creatures lived by them or died by them. But here, under the veil of darkness, something beyond instinct had taken root. The infant, weak and defenseless, should have been easy prey. And yet, the raptor had fought for it, had chosen to stay. A rustling in the undergrowth snapped the raptor's focus back to its surroundings. Its body tensed, muscles coiled like steel cables, ready to pounce. Slowly, it lifted its head, sharp teeth bared in a silent warning. Something was moving in the shadows. The baby stirred, sensing the shift in the raptor's energy. A small whimper escaped its lips, a sound so soft, so fragile, that it almost went unnoticed among the jungle's noise. But the raptor heard it, and that sound alone sent a deep growl vibrating through its throat. The leaves rustled again. This time, the raptor rose to its full height, stepping carefully over the baby as it positioned itself between the infant and the unseen threat. Its claws flexed, the moonlight gleaming off its curved talons. The muscles in its legs were taut, ready to spring forward in an instant. Then, from the foliage, emerged a pair of glowing yellow eyes. A second Velociraptor. For a long moment, there was only silence. The two predators locked eyes, their breath visible in the cool night air. The newcomer was slightly smaller, its frame leaner but no less dangerous. It tilted its head, taking in the sight before it, its kin standing between a human infant and the wild. The second raptor let out a questioning chuff, a sound meant for communication among pack members. It was a challenge, a curiosity. Why was the other standing guard over something so weak? Something that was not theirs? The first raptor held its ground, responding with a deep, resonant growl. A warning, a claim. The second hesitated. It had not come here for conflict, nor had it expected to see its kin behaving in such an unnatural way. And yet, the silent message in its counterpart's posture was clear. This was not prey. This was something else. The jungle waited. The two raptors remained in a tense standoff, their tails swaying ever so slightly in anticipation. The baby, unaware of the primal war waging above it, let out a small noise, a soft coo of curiosity. The second raptor's gaze flickered downward. It took a cautious step forward, its nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air around the child. The first raptor tensed, But it did not attack. Instead, it watched. Then, something incredible happened. The second raptor, after a long moment of examination, let out a low, barely audible trill. A sound of acknowledgement, not a threat, not prey. An understanding passed between the two creatures, something far older than language, something buried deep within the ancient instincts they carried. The second raptor stepped back, its gaze lingering on the child once more before it turned, disappearing silently back into the jungle. The first raptor remained still for a long moment, ensuring the other was truly gone before it finally exhaled, lowering itself back to the ground beside the infant. The child, as if sensing the tension had passed, let out a small sigh and curled into the warmth of its guardian. Above them, the stars gleamed in the prehistoric sky, watching over a bond that should not have existed. And yet it did. The jungle stirred with the first hints of dawn, the sky shifting from deep indigo to the soft hues of early morning. The humid air carried the distant cries of waking creatures, the rustling of the leaves heralding the slow return of life to the prehistoric world. But beneath the thick canopy, in the safety of the underbrush, something unprecedented had taken root. The Velociraptor remained still, curled protectively around the infant as it had been all night. The baby, now fully awake, gurgled softly, its tiny hands reaching toward the creature's feathered hide. The raptor turned its head slightly, its sharp eyes watching as the child's fingers brushed against its skin. It was an odd sensation, one that should have triggered an instinctive reaction, a swipe of claws or a quick snap of jaws. But it didn't. Instead, the raptor simply observed, studying the infant with something that resembled curiosity rather than hostility. It had fought off a predator for this tiny, helpless creature. It had claimed it as its own. And now it was making a choice, one that defied everything nature had dictated. A distant roar echoed through the jungle, sending a ripple of tension through the raptor's frame. It lifted its head, its nostrils flaring as it caught an unfamiliar scent. Something was approaching, something big. The baby, sensing the shift in energy, let out a tiny whimper. The raptor responded immediately, rising to its feet, positioning itself in front of the infant. Its body was tense, muscles coiled like springs, ready to launch into action at the first sign of danger. The undergrowth parted. Emerging from the trees was a massive beast, one unlike any other in this part of the jungle. Its hulking form was covered in dark, coarse fur, its long arms hanging low as it moved with an unsettling grace. Its eyes, deep-set and glowing in the dim morning light, locked onto the raptor and the infant in an instant. A gigantopithecus, a predator of a different kind. The massive ape-like creature let out a guttural growl, its nostrils flaring as it took in the sight before it. It had smelled the baby's scent from a distance, recognizing the weakness in its cries. But what it hadn't expected was the fierce guardian standing between it and its intended prize. The Velociraptor did not move. It let out a low, threatening hiss, baring its curved teeth. The message was clear: this was no easy meal. The gigantopithecus tilted its head, considering the challenge. It had strength towering over the raptor, its muscles thick and built for raw power. But the raptor had speed, intelligence, and something else. A wild, unpredictable energy that made even the strongest creatures think twice before engaging. The two locked eyes. Then the gigantopithecus lunged. The jungle erupted into chaos. The raptor moved first, a blur of motion as it darted to the side, narrowly avoiding the crushing blow of the ape's massive fist. Claws flashed in the dim light as the raptor struck out, slashing at the creature's leg before springing away. The gigantopithecus roared in pain, staggering slightly, but it was far from deterred. It swung its arm again, faster this time, anticipating the raptor's movement. The Velociraptor leapt, using the momentum to land on the ape's back, its claws sinking deep into thick fur. The gigantopithecus howled in rage, thrashing wildly, trying to dislodge its attacker. Meanwhile, the baby lay hidden beneath a cluster of ferns, its tiny hands grasping at the leaves, unaware of the life-or-death battle being waged above it. The raptor clung on, using its powerful hind legs to deliver another vicious strike. Blood sprayed across the ground as the Gigantopithecus staggered, but its resilience was frightening. With a final, furious twist, it managed to grab hold of the raptor, hurling it to the ground with a bone-shaking impact. The world blurred for a second as the raptor hit the earth, its breath knocked from its lungs. But there was no time to recover. The Gigantopithecus loomed above, its massive hand raised for the killing blow. Then a sound, a shrill, piercing cry. The baby. The sound caught the Gigantopithecus off guard, its attention flickering toward the infant for the briefest of moments. And that was all the raptor needed. With an explosive burst of energy, the Velociraptor sprang upward, its sickle-shaped claw slashing across the Gigantopithecus's throat. A spray of crimson stained the jungle floor. The beast let out a gurgled roar, stumbling backward. Its massive form wavered, struggling against its own failing strength. Then it collapsed. Silence. The jungle was still. The raptor stood over its fallen opponent, chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. Blood dripped from its claws, but its focus had already shifted, turned. The baby lay there, staring up with wide, innocent eyes. The Velociraptor approached slowly, its predatory form moving with careful precision. It nudged the infant gently with its snout, as if ensuring it was unharmed. The baby cooed in response. The battle was over. The predator had protected its young. And against all odds, the bond between them had only grown stronger. The jungle, once a battlefield, had now settled into an eerie calm. The body of the Gigantopithecus lay lifeless, its enormous form partially covered by thick ferns and broken branches. The scent of blood lingered in the humid air, warning other creatures of the violence that had taken place. Yet, amidst the raw brutality of survival, a scene unfolded that defied nature's laws. The Velociraptor stood over the infant, its golden eyes scanning the surroundings, ensuring no further threats lurked in the underbrush. The baby, blissfully unaware of the fight that had nearly cost them both their lives, reached out once more, its tiny fingers brushing against the predator's scaled snout. The touch, soft and gentle, sent an odd sensation rippling through the raptor's instincts. It did not recoil. Instead, it allowed the child's hand to rest there, to explore. The Velociraptor had spent its life as a hunter, a creature of razor-sharp instincts, reacting to danger and opportunity with speed and efficiency. Yet now, in the wake of this battle, it found itself bound to something far weaker, something that had no means to fight, no way to fend for itself. A burden. And yet, the raptor felt no compulsion to abandon it. Instead, it took a step closer. The baby, still wrapped in soft pelts, let out a small, happy sound, the innocence of it so foreign in this ruthless world. The raptor chuffed in response, a low, breathy sound that might have been mistaken for amusement, if such a thing could even exist between species so different. A rustling in the foliage made the raptor snap its head up. The jungle was never still for long. The scent of blood was sure to attract scavengers. The raptor lowered its body, nudging the baby toward the safety of the undergrowth, pressing it gently beneath a cluster of vines. The infant, sensing the shift in atmosphere, quieted almost instinctively, as if understanding the urgency. The leaves parted. This time it was not a predator. A group of small, feathered dinosaurs stepped cautiously into the clearing. Shrewd, clever, opportunistic scavengers that often trailed behind larger predators, feeding on their leftovers. Their sharp eyes flickered between the raptor and the carcass of the Gigantopithecus, their heads tilting with curiosity. They were not here for a fight. They were here to claim what remained. The raptor remained still, watching. It did not react aggressively. It had already secured what mattered. The baby was hidden, safe beneath the ferns. The fight was over. One of the Truden let out a short, clicking sound, signaling to the others that it was safe to approach. Slowly, the pack began to pick at the fallen beast, their small but efficient teeth tearing through flesh. The raptor remained vigilant, but it did not attack. For the first time in its existence, it had chosen something over the hunt. As the sun began to rise, Casting golden light through the jungle canopy, the Velociraptor made a decision. It lowered its head toward the infant, carefully grasping the soft pelts in its jaws, lifting the baby from the ground. Then, with the ease of a mother carrying its own young, it turned and disappeared into the jungle. The hunt was over. The journey had begun. The dense jungle was beginning to stir fully now, golden beams of sunlight cutting through the thick canopy and illuminating the damp forest floor. Insects buzzed, distant creatures called to one another, and the rustling of leaves signaled life moving through the undergrowth. But one movement in particular defied nature's expectations: the sight of a deadly velociraptor carefully carrying a human infant through the jungle. The raptor's grip was delicate, its razor-sharp teeth barely holding onto the soft pelts wrapped around the child. Each step was calculated, muscles flexing as it weaved between ancient trees and twisted vines, navigating the uneven terrain with ease. The infant, remarkably calm, made soft cooing noises, as if content in the predator's grasp. The warmth of the creature's breath against its skin seemed to comfort rather than frighten it. It was a bond neither should have formed, yet it had already taken root. The raptor moved swiftly but cautiously, pausing every so often to scent the air. The jungle was full of dangers, and though it was an apex predator, it was not the largest nor the strongest. It had already defied the laws of the wild by protecting the baby. Now it had to ensure its survival. A distant rumbling sound made the raptor stop mid-stride, head snapping toward the horizon. Something heavy was moving. The deep tremors in the ground signaled the presence of a massive creature, one that commanded respect from all who shared the land. The infant stirred, sensing the tension in its guardian. The raptor crouched low, ears alert. The sound of snapping branches grew closer, the heavy footfalls reverberating through the earth. Then, emerging from the misty jungle, a towering figure stepped into view. Tyrannosaurus Rex, the apex of the prehistoric world. The raptor knew this was a creature even it could not challenge. The T-Rex was a force of pure destruction, its enormous head covered in scars from past battles, its amber eyes scanning the jungle for its next meal. It had likely smelled the carcass of the fallen Gigantopithecus or had simply been wandering its massive territory. The raptor remained still, its instincts screaming to run, to flee before it was noticed. But one thing stopped it: the baby. If it bolted now, the movement would trigger the T-Rex's hunting response. If it remained, it risked becoming prey. For the first time in its life, the raptor hesitated. The T-Rex let out a deep, resonant huff, its breath sending ripples through the leaves. It had not yet spotted them, but it was close. The baby let out a small noise. The raptor's heart pounded. The T-Rex's head snapped in their direction. Silence. The predator's enormous nostrils flared, taking in the scent of the raptor, the lingering blood of the previous battle, and the unfamiliar scent of the baby. Its eyes narrowed slightly, considering. Then, the great beast took a single step forward. The raptor tensed, ready to bolt, but it knew it could not outrun the king of the dinosaurs in a straight chase. It had to be smart. It had to. A sudden shriek cut through the tension. The jungle erupted into chaos as a pack of large, feathered creatures burst from the underbrush. Carnotaurus, swift, powerful predators with short but deadly arms and razor-lined jaws. They were hunters of the mid-sized game, but in numbers they could take on almost anything. And now, they had stumbled into the path of the T-Rex. The great beast turned its attention to the intruders, letting out a guttural roar that shook the very trees. The Carnotaurus pack hesitated for a fraction of a second, then scattered, realizing they had wandered too close to a predator they could not challenge. It was the distraction the raptor needed. Without a moment's hesitation, it darted into the thick foliage, moving like a shadow through the trees. Its grip on the baby remained careful, controlled, even as it sped away from the chaos unfolding behind it. The T-Rex, momentarily focused on the fleeing Carnotaurus, did not pursue. The jungle closed behind them, swallowing the Velociraptor and the human infant as they disappeared into the depths of the wild. For now, they had survived. But the journey was far from over. The raptor moved with precision, weaving through the tangled jungle as though it were an extension of its own body. The deep roars of the T-Rex faded behind it, swallowed by the dense foliage and the ceaseless chatter of the jungle. The infant remained secure in its grasp, cooing softly as if unaware of the many dangers that lurked in the shadows. The sun had begun its ascent, the golden light filtering through the towering ferns, dappling the ground in shifting patterns. The raptor knew it had to find shelter soon. It could not afford to travel in the open for too long. Its presence, along with the unmistakable scent of the infant, was bound to attract unwanted attention. After a short but cautious journey, the raptor came across a cluster of rock formations near the edge of a slow-moving river. The rocks jutted out from the earth, forming natural overhangs that could provide shelter. More importantly, the water source would ensure their survival. The raptor sniffed the air, ensuring there were no immediate threats, before stepping forward and carefully placing the baby down beneath a shaded alcove. The infant blinked up at its unlikely protector, tiny hands reaching toward the raptor's snout. The creature watched for a moment before lowering itself to rest nearby, its golden eyes never leaving the surrounding jungle. The momentary peace did not last long. A rustling in the nearby brush sent the raptor back on high alert. It lifted its head, nostrils flaring, senses sharpened to their limits. The movement was careful, calculated. Not the erratic scuttling of smaller creatures, but the deliberate approach of something watching, waiting. The raptor rose to its feet, muscles coiled and ready. A set of eyes emerged from the foliage, sharp, intelligent. Another raptor. This one was larger, its feathers darker, blending into the undergrowth. A male. And he was not alone. A second set of eyes glowed from the shadows. Then another. Pack. The lone raptor felt its heartbeat quicken. It had been separated from its own kind for so long, an outcast from its former pack. Now a wanderer bound to an infant it had no reason to protect. Yet here, before it, were members of its own species, perhaps even its former packmates. The lead raptor let out a low, guttural sound. A question. A challenge. The lone raptor held its ground. The pack hesitated. They could smell the infant, could sense that something unnatural had taken place. Their instincts told them to see the human as prey, but they were also confused. Why had one of their own claimed it? A delicate tension hung between them, the jungle itself seeming to hold its breath. Then the lead raptor took a step forward. The lone raptor tensed, prepared to defend the infant at all costs. But something unexpected happened. The lead raptor did not attack. Instead, it tilted its head slightly, observing. It let out another sound, softer this time, not one of challenge, but of understanding. The pack had seen strange things in this ever-changing world. They had witnessed creatures of all shapes and sizes defy their natural roles. And here, before them, was something unprecedented. A bond between a predator and a creature that should have been its prey. The lead raptor let out a final chuff before stepping back, signaling to the others. They lowered their postures, no longer viewing the lone raptor as a threat. For the first time in a long time, the outcast was not alone. The jungle had shifted once more, and the journey was only beginning. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the jungle in hues of amber and gold, the newly reunited raptor pack remained motionless, their sharp eyes flicking between one another, assessing, processing. The tension that had filled the air moments ago had not entirely dissipated, but a fragile truce had formed. The lone raptor stood protectively over the infant, whose tiny coos and soft fidgeting were alien sounds in a world of growls, hisses, and battle cries. The pack watched with an air of uncertainty. Had their kin gone mad? Or was there something deeper at play? The lead raptor, larger and more scarred than the others, stepped forward cautiously. His nostrils flared, scenting the infant, his head tilting with curiosity. He could sense the vulnerability of the small creature, yet he made no move to attack. Instead, he let out a low, questioning sound directed at the lone raptor. A conversation was happening, one beyond human understanding. The lone raptor responded with a chuff, a mixture of defiance and explanation. It did not bare its teeth nor issue a warning. It simply stated its position in the only language their kind knew. This creature was under its protection. The lead raptor exhaled sharply, shifting on his talons, but he did not challenge further. Instead, he turned his head toward the jungle, his posture signaling something different, a new priority. The jungle was not kind to outcasts, and the lone raptor had survived against impossible odds. But even it could not last forever on its own. The pack had accepted the outcast once more. The jungle had changed. Without hesitation, the lead raptor turned and disappeared into the dense underbrush, his movements silent and ghost-like. The others followed, but one remained, a younger raptor with sleek feathers and a more agile frame. It studied the infant with an air of cautious fascination before clicking its teeth softly and vanishing into the night. The lone raptor stood motionless for a long moment, listening to the sounds of its pack fading into the jungle. Then, it lowered its head and nudged the infant, ensuring it was still safe. The baby let out a quiet, sleepy sigh, curling against the raptor's warm scales, its tiny fingers brushing against the creature's clawed foot. The raptor, despite all instincts screaming otherwise, remained still. The jungle was vast, its dangers endless, but for the first time in its existence, the lone raptor was not alone. It had a pack once more, a pack that had chosen not to reject it but to accept the unthinkable. And as the night wrapped its cool embrace around them, a new chapter of survival began. For the first time, predator and prey had become something else entirely. They had become family. The night air carried the distant echoes of creatures stirring in the jungle, but within the shaded alcove beneath the rock formation, the raptor and the infant remained undisturbed. The pack had moved on for the time being, accepting the lone raptor's claim over the child, but their presence would not be far. The jungle, for all its dangers, had also given the outcast something it had lost, a place to belong, even if the circumstances were beyond comprehension. The infant, now settled in a small nest of moss and leaves, wriggled slightly before drifting into a deep sleep. The raptor remained still beside it, watching, waiting, listening. This was uncharted territory for the creature. It had protected hatchlings of its own species before, but this was different. The child was weak, unable to defend itself, yet something about its presence stirred an instinct the raptor did not recognize. A rustling in the nearby foliage made the raptor's head snap up. Its muscles tensed, prepared to attack, but the scent that reached its nostrils was familiar. A moment later, the younger raptor from the pack emerged from the shadows, moving cautiously, keeping its movements slow and deliberate. It had returned, though whether out of curiosity or something deeper, the lone raptor could not be sure. The younger raptor observed the scene before it, the sleeping infant, the watchful guardian. It let out a low, inquisitive chuff, testing the boundaries of this newfound reality. The lone raptor did not react aggressively but did not fully relax either. A silent understanding passed between them. Then, in an unexpected gesture, the younger raptor took a step forward and lowered its head, sniffing the infant. The child stirred slightly but did not wake. The lone raptor let out a low, steady breath, a sign of trust. It was still cautious, but it did not challenge the younger raptor's presence. The younger raptor pulled back, flicking its tail in thought. Then, to the lone raptor's surprise, it turned and disappeared into the jungle again. Moments later, it returned. In its jaws, it carried something small, an offering, a piece of fruit plucked from a nearby bush. The lone raptor blinked, uncertain of the action at first. Raptors were hunters, not gatherers, but this younger one had returned with something that, while foreign to their kind, could serve as food for the infant. The younger raptor gently placed the fruit near the sleeping child and stepped back, watching. It was an act of acknowledgement, of understanding. For a long moment, the lone raptor did not move. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, it lowered its head and nudged the fruit closer to the infant. The bond had extended beyond just predator and prey. It had become something more, a tribe, family. As the jungle hummed with the sounds of life, the velociraptors sat in silent vigil over the sleeping infant, bound by an unspoken truth. Against all odds, They had chosen something greater than survival. They had chosen each other. As the first light of dawn stretched across the jungle, the lone raptor stirred, its senses sharpening instantly. The infant remained asleep, nestled in the makeshift bed of moss, while the younger raptor still lingered nearby, perched on a rock, watching the world wake up. The jungle had not yet erupted into its usual chaos, but the moment of calm would not last long. The lone raptor turned its head slightly, scenting the air. Something was different. The usual earthy aroma of damp leaves and soil was tinged with something sharper, something unfamiliar, a scent that did not belong. The younger raptor sensed it, too, shifting its weight, its claws flexing in the soft dirt. A sound echoed through the trees, not the distant roar of a predator or the rustling of prey, but something else entirely. Footsteps, human footsteps. The lone raptor's eyes narrowed. It had encountered humans before, though never at such close proximity. It had seen them wield strange weapons, had smelled the metallic scent of their machines, had heard their strange, rhythmic speech echo through the jungle. And now they were here. The younger raptor let out a low growl, but the lone raptor silenced it with a quick flick of its tail. Aggression would not serve them now. Their first priority was the infant. The baby shifted, letting out a small whimper, oblivious to the approaching danger. The lone raptor made a decision. It gently nudged the infant with its snout, encouraging it to wake. The child stirred, its tiny fingers grasping at the air before its eyes fluttered open. It blinked up at the raptor with drowsy curiosity, unaware of the urgency in its guardian's movements. The footsteps grew louder. The lone raptor nudged the younger raptor, signaling that they needed to move. The younger one hesitated but ultimately obeyed, disappearing into the foliage as silently as it had arrived. The infant let out another small noise, this time one of protest, as the raptor carefully scooped it up, securing it between its teeth with the utmost care. The underbrush parted. 3 figures stepped into view. Humans. They were clad in strange garments, their bodies wrapped in layered materials that shimmered faintly in the morning light. 2 of them held long objects in their hands, their grips tight, their stances cautious. Hunters. The lone raptor's muscles coiled, its mind racing. Could run, but they would pursue. Could fight, but the risk was too great, not for itself but for the infant. The men exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Then one of them took a step forward, raising a hand as if in greeting. The lone raptor held its ground. The jungle held its breath. A choice had to be made. The jungle remained eerily still as the lone raptor locked eyes with the approaching humans. The infant let out a small, sleepy whimper, shifting in the raptor's gentle grip. The sound was soft, almost imperceptible, but to the humans it was unmistakable. They froze. One of them, the tallest of the 3, exchanged a quick glance with his companions before speaking in hushed tones. The raptor did not understand their words, but it recognized the change in their demeanor, cautious yet curious. They were no longer just hunters on the prowl. They had seen the infant, and now they were hesitating. The younger raptor remained hidden in the underbrush, watching closely. Its tail twitched anxiously, its instincts telling it to run or fight. But it would follow the lone raptor's lead. The tallest human took another step forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. The lone raptor tensed but did not flee. It had already made its decision. It would protect the child, no matter the cost. The infant stirred again, blinking up at the raptor, then at the humans. For the first time since the strange bond had formed, the baby reached out, not toward its protector but toward the humans. Tiny fingers curled in the air, an unconscious gesture, a memory long buried in the child's mind. The humans inhaled sharply. They recognized the child. One of them, a woman with dark hair and cautious eyes, whispered something urgent to her companions. The raptor caught the shift in their stance. They were no longer predators assessing a threat. They were something else now, something the raptor had never seen before in their kind. They were desperate. The lone raptor did not move, but it felt the weight of the moment. It had carried this child through the dangers of the jungle, had fought for it, had shared an unexplainable connection. And now, for the first time, it was being asked to let go. The jungle whispered around them, the wind rustling the leaves, the distant calls of unseen creatures filling the silence. The raptor slowly lowered its head, bringing the infant closer to the humans. It did not release its grip, not yet. It needed to be sure. It needed to see their intentions. The woman stepped forward cautiously, hands trembling, her eyes locked onto the baby. She whispered something, soft, soothing, filled with meaning the raptor could not comprehend. But the child did. The baby let out a small, delighted sound and reached further. The raptor's grip loosened. The child was lifted from its grasp, cradled in the human woman's arms. She held the infant close, her body trembling with relief. The other humans exhaled, their rigid postures easing. The lone raptor took a step back. Something deep within its instincts stirred. This was not a loss. This was not abandonment. This was something else. A choice. The younger raptor let out a questioning chuff, but the lone raptor did not respond. It only turned, stepping back into the foliage, back into the jungle that had shaped it, that had made it a survivor. The humans watched, unmoving, as the velociraptors disappeared into the undergrowth, their golden eyes the last thing visible before they, too, were swallowed by the wild. The child had been returned. The bond had not been broken, but the jungle would always remember.